The first time Evelyn Reed said she would marry me, I had a hammer in my hand, a mouthful of porch dust, and absolutely no idea that half the neighborhood was about to hear it. She was standing 2 steps above me in a faded blue sundress, one hand on the railing I had just told her not to touch, smiling like she had been born with trouble tucked under her tongue. "If I were 20 years younger," she said, "I'd marry you before some woman with better knees and worse taste got to you first." My hammer missed the nail. Not by much, but enough that I had to pretend the sound of metal scraping wood was part of the plan. Across the street, Mrs. Donnelly stopped watering her petunias. A delivery guy slowed down like he had stumbled into the best scene of a movie. And I, Caleb Hart, 38 years old and usually competent with both tools and words, looked up at my widowed neighbor and forgot how breathing worked. Evelyn realized what she'd said about half a second too late. Her smile faltered, then came back softer, like she was daring the world to make something of it. I cleared my throat. "That's a pretty serious proposal for a woman holding a lemonade pitcher." "It's fresh squeezed," she said. "I believe in bringing something to the table." I should have laughed and let it pass. That would have been the normal thing, the safe thing. But there was nothing safe about the way the late afternoon sun caught the silver in her dark hair, or the way her eyes stayed on mine just a moment longer than a joke required. So I said, "For the record, I don't think you'd need to be 20 years younger." Her fingers tightened around the pitcher. Mrs. Donnelly's hose sprayed directly into one of her own flower pots until mud splashed her ankles. Evelyn looked away first, but not before I saw the color rise in her cheeks. That was the moment everything changed, though neither of us admitted it then. Not out loud. I had moved onto Maple Hollow Lane 8 months earlier, after a divorce that had left me with a quiet house, a decent truck, and a suspicious relationship with silence. My ex-wife Claire hadn't been cruel. We had just become two people who shared a mortgage and forgot how to share a life. So I bought a smaller place, started over, and told myself I liked being alone. That was before Evelyn. She lived next door in a white house with green shutters and a porch that had been sagging like an old man's shoulders since spring. She was 56, though she carried herself with the unbothered grace of someone who had stopped asking permission to exist. Her husband, Patrick, had died 3 years before from a heart attack while pruning the magnolia tree in their backyard. I knew that because everyone on the lane knew everything, whether you asked or not. I also knew Evelyn taught watercolor classes at the community center, made coffee strong enough to qualify as a life choice, and had a laugh that traveled through open windows and made my house feel less empty. For months, our relationship had been neighborly. Trash cans, borrowed sugar, me shoveling her walkway after a late snow, her leaving a container of chicken soup on my porch when I got the flu and writing, "Don't argue, you look dramatic when sick," on a sticky note. But there had been moments, small ones. Her hand brushing mine when she passed me pruning shears. The way she leaned against the fence at dusk and talked to me like she had nowhere better to be. The night I found her sitting on her porch steps in the rain, fully dressed, staring at nothing, and she said, "Some anniversaries don't care what the calendar says." I had sat beside her until the rain soaked through my jeans. I didn't touch her. I wanted to, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "You want me to talk or shut up?" She had looked at me then, eyes wet but amused. "Caleb," she said, "you may be the first man in history to offer both useful options." After that, something shifted. Not enough to name. Enough to notice. The porch repair started because one of her boards cracked under my boot while I was helping carry in a box of art supplies from her car. I sank halfway through, flailed like a drunk flamingo, and grabbed the railing. Evelyn laughed so hard she had to sit down. "I'm glad my near-death experience entertains you," I said. "You didn't nearly die. You nearly became interesting." "I'm already interesting. You alphabetize your garage shelves." "That's called civilization." She smiled at me over the box. "That's called a cry for help." I told her I'd fix the porch the next Saturday. She told me she could hire someone. I told her she could, but I was already offended by the craftsmanship and emotionally involved. That was how I ended up kneeling on her porch, replacing warped boards while she floated in and out of the house with lemonade, sandwiches, and increasingly dangerous commentary. She didn't hover. Evelyn never hovered. She participated. She handed me screws before I asked. She held boards steady. She told me Patrick had built the porch himself the first summer they bought the house, then went quiet in a way that made me set down the drill. He must have loved this place, I said. He did. She ran her palm along the old railing. He loved projects. I loved pretending I wasn't impressed. Were you? With the porch? She looked at me. Eventually. There was something in her voice that landed deeper than the words. I stood, wiping sawdust off my hands. We were close then, closer than we needed to be. I could see the tiny flecks of green in her brown eyes. I could smell lemon on her skin and cedar from the board stacked beside us. You okay? I asked. She studied me for a second. You ask that like you're not afraid of the answer. I've learned better than to ask questions I don't mean. Her face changed, not dramatically, just enough. Then she reached out and brushed a curl of wood, shaving off my shoulder. Her fingers lingered for the length of one heartbeat. Careful, Caleb, she said quietly. A woman could get used to being looked at like that. I tried to make a joke, I really did. Nothing came. Because the truth was, I had been looking at her that way for weeks, maybe longer. Then Mrs. Donnelly called from across the street. Evelyn, dear, is he charging you by the hour or by the blush? Evelyn rolled her eyes, but she didn't step away from me. Neither, she called back. He works for Lemonade and Emotional Abuse. I'm underpaid, I said. That was when she made the marriage joke. That was when I answered too honestly. And that was when the whole porch seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, neither of us moved. The street sounds thinned out. A dog barked somewhere. A lawnmower coughed and died. My pulse had no business being that loud. Evelyn finally looked down at the pitcher in her hands. I shouldn't have said that, she murmured. Which part? The part people heard. I smiled despite myself. That leaves options. She looked at me then, and the playfulness was still there, but under it was something more fragile. Your trouble, she said. I'm replacing your porch. Exactly. Helpful trouble is the worst kind. I wanted to tell her she was beautiful, not for her age, not despite anything. Just beautiful in the direct, ordinary, devastating way certain people are when they stop trying to impress anyone. Instead, I picked up a board. Then I'll try to be less charming with the power tools. Don't strain yourself. I laughed, and she did too, and for a few minutes we found our rhythm again. Measure, cut, fasten, tease. Pretend nothing had happened. But something had. Every time she passed behind me, I felt aware of her. Every time I reached for a screw, she placed one in my palm, her fingers grazing mine just long enough to make the air tighten. By 5 o'clock, the worst section of the porch was solid again. I tested it with my boot, then turned to her. Go ahead, I said. First ceremonial walk. She lifted one eyebrow. If I fall, I'm haunting you. I'll deserve it. She stepped onto the new boards, slow and theatrical, then bounced once. The porch held. Her smile opened in a way that made something in my chest ache. Then, without warning, the front wheel of a silver SUV jumped the curb and stopped hard in front of her house. Evelyn's smile disappeared. A woman about my age got out, face tight, eyes moving from the tools to me to Evelyn's flushed cheeks. Mom, she said, voice sharp enough to cut through the summer air, please tell me he's just fixing the porch. The woman by the SUV had Evelyn's eyes. Same shape, same dark brightness, same talent for making a person feel examined from the inside out. But where Evelyn's gaze usually held warmth, her daughter's held alarm. Evelyn set the lemonade pitcher on the porch rail with deliberate calm. Hello to you too, Sophie. Sophie looked at me again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean… Yes, you did, Evelyn said. I picked up my hammer because suddenly my hands needed a job. Caleb Hart, I live next door. I know who you are. Sophie's mouth tightened. Mom talks about you. That sentence landed somewhere between compliment and felony charge. Evelyn crossed her arms. I talk about Mrs. Donnelly too, but no one accuses her of compromising me over hydrangeas. Sophie winced. Mom. What? You know what? The afternoon that had been warm and teasing cooled by several degrees. I knew that look on Sophie's face. Not cruelty, fear wearing its least flattering clothes. I'd seen it in my own mirror during my divorce. Porch is almost done, I said, keeping my voice even. Your mom had a rotten section. It wasn't safe. Sophie glanced at the new boards, then back at Evelyn. You could have called a contractor. I called a neighbor, Evelyn said. A young neighbor. I stared at a screw on the porch floor like it had just become fascinating. Evelyn didn't flinch. Caleb is 38, not 19. That's not the point. No, the point is you came in hot because you saw me smiling. Sophie's face softened for half a second, then hardened again. I worry about you. I know, Evelyn's voice gentled. But worry is not the same as permission. The words hung there. Sophie swallowed. Can we talk inside? Evelyn looked at me, not apologetically. Not exactly. More like she was checking whether I had heard the whole thing and was still standing. I gave her the smallest nod. I'll clean up out here. She hesitated, then touched my forearm as she passed. It was brief, barely anything. It felt like a choice. The screen door closed behind them, but old houses are terrible at secrets. I moved my tools farther down the porch, giving them what privacy I could, catching only broken pieces. People will talk. They already do. Dad. Then silence, that one word found me anyway. Dad. I set the hammer down and sat back on my heels. I had no business being hurt by it. Patrick Reed had been her husband, her history, the man who built the porch I was now repairing. I wasn't competing with a ghost, and if I ever started, I hoped someone would hit me with my own drill. Still, wanting Evelyn felt complicated in a way wanting someone my own age had never felt. Not because of the years between us, because she had loved deeply before. Because her life had roots, because I was suddenly aware that my presence might look, from the outside, like a man stepping into a house that still held another man's fingerprints. The door opened 20 minutes later. Sophie came out first, eyes redder than before. She stopped beside me. I was rude, she said. I stood. You were worried. That doesn't make it okay. She glanced at the porch. It looks good. Thanks. She opened her mouth, closed it, then looked me straight on. My mother is more fragile than she acts. Behind her, Evelyn appeared in the doorway. No, Evelyn said. Sophie turned. Mom, no, I am grieving sometimes. Lonely sometimes. Irritated with my adult child frequently, but I am not fragile. Sophie's shoulders slumped. Evelyn stepped onto the porch. I love you. Go home. Text me when you get there. For a second, I thought Sophie would argue. Instead, she kissed her mother's cheek, gave me one last measuring look, and walked to her SUV. When she drove off, the street seemed to exhale. Evelyn stayed facing the road long after the SUV disappeared. I didn't know what to say, so I said the truest small thing. I can come back tomorrow to finish the railing. She looked at me then. Running? No. Thinking about it? I gave a quiet laugh. Maybe a little. At least you're honest. With you, I try to be. That made her look away. The porch was messy around us, boards stacked, screws scattered in a magnetic tray, the lemonade sweating on the rail. The whole scene felt too ordinary for the tightness in my chest. I'm sorry, she said. You didn't do anything wrong. I let you get pulled into family weather. I live in Ohio. I own a coat. Her mouth twitched. That was terrible. You smiled. I had a muscle spasm. I stepped closer, not enough to crowd her. Evelyn. She went still at the sound of her name. I'm not confused about your age, I said. Or mine. I'm not confused about your husband. I'm not confused about your daughter being protective. I know this isn't simple. Her eyes searched mine. But I like you, I said. Not as a project. Not as a lonely man looking for a warm kitchen. I like you. The woman who insults my garage organization. The woman who paints wildflowers like they offended her personally. The woman who made a marriage joke and then looked like she wanted me to answer. Her breath caught. I did want you to answer, she whispered. There it was. No thunder, no music. Just Evelyn Reed standing on new porch boards with sawdust at her feet, telling me the truth. I stepped closer again. And now? Her gaze dropped to my mouth, then rose. Now I'm wondering whether my neighbors have gone back inside. I glanced across the street. Mrs. Donnelly's curtain snapped shut. Nope, I said. Evelyn laughed, soft and helpless, and the sound loosened something in me. Then she reached for my hand. Not my forearm, not an accidental brush. My hand. Her fingers slid between mine, warm from the sun and faintly sticky with lemonade. She looked down at our hands like she was both pleased and terrified by them. I haven't done this in a long time, she said. Held hands on a porch? Wanted to. That went through me clean. I turned my palm, lacing our fingers more securely. We can go slow. Don't be too noble, she said, but her voice trembled. It makes me suspicious. I'm not noble. I'm trying very hard not to kiss you in front of Mrs. Donnelly's surveillance operation. Evelyn's smile turned dangerous again. Maybe just stand closer then. For research. For research, I agreed. I moved until our shoulders nearly touched. She tilted toward me, and for one quiet minute, we stood there looking out at Maple Hollow Lane like it was some grand view instead of parked cars and lawn ornaments. Her thumb moved over mine, small, devastating. Caleb, she said. Yeah? If we do this, people will have opinions. People have opinions about mailbox colors. My daughter may struggle. I understand. I may struggle, she admitted. Some days I feel 40. Some days I feel 80. Some days I miss Patrick so badly I can't remember what wanting anything else is supposed to feel like. I squeezed her hand. Then on those days, we don't pretend. You tell me. And if you get tired of complicated? I spent 12 years in a marriage that died because we both kept choosing easy silence. I looked at her. I'd rather choose complicated truth. Her eyes shone. Then she rose onto her toes and kissed my cheek. It was gentle, almost formal, but her lips lingered at the corner of my mouth close enough to make my entire body forget the rules. When she eased back, her cheeks were pink. There, she said. Now Mrs. Donnelly can report something accurate. I laughed under my breath. That was mercifully scandalous. Don't get cocky, it was a deposit. A deposit? On a proper kiss, she said, still holding my hand. When I decide you've earned it. I grinned. What's the payment plan? Finish my railing, then ask me to dinner like a man with intentions. My heart kicked hard. Evelyn Reed, I said. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow night? She smiled, and this time there was no joke to hide behind. Yes, Caleb Hart, she said. I will. I finished Evelyn's railing the next morning with the concentration of a man building a cathedral. It was ridiculous. It was a porch railing on a quiet street where Mrs. Donnelly had already pretended to prune the same bush 3 times for a better view. But Evelyn had said dinner like a man with intentions, and apparently my intentions required sanding every edge twice. At noon, she came outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You're frowning at that post like it owes you money, she said. It's crooked. It's been crooked since 1997. That doesn't mean it gets to stay that way. She handed me a mug. You're nervous. I took a sip and burned my tongue. I'm focused. Caleb. I looked at her. She wore jeans, a white blouse, and her hair pinned loosely at the back of her neck. One silver dark strand had escaped and curled against her cheek. I had the sudden, inconvenient urge to brush it behind her ear and see if she leaned into my hand. Yes, I said. I'm nervous. Her expression softened. Good. Good? If you were too smooth, I'd mistrust you. I can trip over a toolbox if that helps. Save something for dinner. By 6:30, I had showered, changed shirts 3 times, and stood in front of my bathroom mirror wondering if a 38-year-old man could look both respectful and kissable. I settled for a navy button-down and dark jeans. When I knocked on Evelyn's door, she opened it wearing a deep green dress that wrapped at her waist and made me forget the speech I had prepared about the restaurant having outdoor seating. Her eyes moved over me slowly enough to be intentional. Well, she said. I swallowed. Well? You clean up dangerously. You look. I stopped because beautiful felt too small and gorgeous, felt like something a man said when he wanted credit for noticing. You look like the reason I'm going to be useless at conversation. That earned me the smile I'd been hoping for. Then I'll carry us, she said. I have experience with difficult students. Dinner was at a little Italian place near the town square, the kind with candles and glass jars and a chalkboard menu no one could read without squinting. The hostess glanced from Evelyn to me, then back again. Not cruelly, just curious. Evelyn noticed. Her chin lifted. I leaned close and murmured, "If you want, I can tell her you're my parole officer." She coughed on a laugh. "Behave. I'm trying to make you comfortable." "No, you're trying to make me laugh." "Is it working?" She looked up at me, eyes bright. "Annoyingly." We sat on the patio beneath string lights. For the first 10 minutes, we talked too politely. Weather, food, her watercolor class, my work restoring old houses. Then the waiter brought wine. Evelyn took one sip and said, "All right, this is terrible." The wine? The pretending we're casual. Relief hit me so hard I laughed. "Thank God." She set her glass down. "I don't want to waste our first date discussing patio heaters." "Our first date," I repeated. Her cheeks warmed. "Don't make me take it back." "Never." The word came out more serious than I meant, but she didn't look away. So I told her about my divorce. Not the tidy version people got over backyard fences. The real one. How Claire and I had stopped touching years before we stopped loving each other. How being left wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing I had been lonely while still married. Evelyn listened with her whole face. When I finished, she reached across the table and touched 2 fingers to my wrist. "That must have been awful," she said. "It was quiet," I said. "Sometimes that felt worse." She nodded like she understood too well. Then she told me about Patrick. Not like a widow reciting facts, like a woman opening a carefully wrapped box. "He was funny," she said. "Stubborn. He sang badly on purpose, except I'm not entirely sure it was on purpose. He loved me fiercely. And sometimes near the end, he drove me mad because he acted like every argument might be our last and therefore I should let him win." "Did you?" "Absolutely not." I smiled. She looked down at her plate. "After he died, everyone wanted me to become sacred, untouchable. Patrick's widow. Grief in sensible shoes?" Her fingers tightened around her napkin. "But I'm still a woman, Caleb. I still want to be looked at, teased, desired. Then I feel guilty for wanting it." I covered her hand with mine. "Look at me," I said softly. She did. "I desire you." The patio noise faded around us, her lips parted. I felt my pulse in my throat, but I didn't take it back. "Not because you're lonely, not because I'm lonely, because when you walk into a room, I notice. Because when you laugh, I want to be the reason. Because yesterday, when you kissed my cheek, I thought about it all night." Her eyes glistened, but her smile was pure Evelyn. "All night?" "I slept eventually." "Liar." "Barely." Her thumb slid over my knuckles. "I thought about it too." That was the moment the date became real. Not dinner with a neighbor, not curiosity, not scandal. Us. Afterward, we walked through the square under the soft orange street lamps. Our hands found each other without discussion. Evelyn's shoulder brushed mine, and neither of us moved away. Outside the closed florist, she stopped to admire a bucket of white peonies left in the window display. "Patrick used to bring me those on our anniversary," she said. I felt the old caution rise in me. "We can keep walking." "No." She squeezed my hand. "I want to be able to say his name without you disappearing." "I'm not going anywhere." She turned toward me. "Promise?" It was too soon for forever, too early for declarations that belonged in movies. So I gave her the promise I could keep. "I won't make you feel like your past is competition." Her face softened so completely it almost hurt to see. Then she stepped closer. "Caleb." I knew that tone now. It moved through me like hate. "Yes?" "I think you've earned your deposit refund." I smiled. "Is that what we're calling it?" She placed one hand on my chest, right over my heart. "If you make a joke, I may reconsider." I shut up. Her fingers curled lightly in my shirt, and I bent my head slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. She didn't. Our first kiss was soft, careful, and lasted about 3 seconds before careful went out of fashion. Evelyn made a small sound against my mouth, surprised or pleased or both, and I felt it everywhere. I slid my hand to her waist, not pulling, just holding. She came closer anyway. The years between us, the neighbors, Sophie's worry, Patrick's ghost, my failed marriage, all of it fell back for one impossible minute. There was only Evelyn's mouth warm under mine and her hand pressed to my chest like she wanted proof I was real. When we broke apart, she laughed breathlessly. "Oh," she said. I rested my forehead near hers. "Good oh or bad oh?" "Caleb, I am 56 years old. I know a good oh." I laughed helplessly, and she kissed me again, quicker this time, smiling against my mouth. By the time I drove her home, we were quieter but not awkward. I walked her to the porch I had repaired, and she stood on the top step, putting us almost eye to eye. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "Thank you for saying yes." She traced one finger along the new railing. "You did good work." "I had motivation." "Me?" "Dinner." She narrowed her eyes. I grinned. "Yes, you." She touched my cheek, her palm warm from the evening. "I don't know exactly what we're doing." "Neither do I." "That should scare me." "Does it?" "Yes." Her thumb brushed the corner of my mouth. "But not enough to stop." I turned my face and kissed her palm. Her breath caught, and the sound nearly undid me. From inside her house, her phone started ringing. Once, twice. She glanced toward the door but didn't move. "You should get that," I said. "I should." Neither of us moved. The phone stopped, then immediately started again. Evelyn sighed. "That will be Sophie." "I'll say goodnight." She caught my hand before I could step back. "Not like you're retreating." So I kissed her on the porch, slow and unmistakable because she asked without asking, and because I wanted her to know I was choosing her in the open. When I finally left, she was smiling. The next morning, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Not from Evelyn. A single line written in block letters. "Be careful with her." I stared at the note longer than it deserved. Be careful with her. No signature, no threat exactly, just 5 words tucked under a wiper blade by someone who had watched me leave Evelyn's porch smiling like a fool. My first instinct was irritation. My second was to walk next door and show her. My third, and the only one worth trusting, was to make coffee first so I didn't arrive sounding like a man ready to fight a mailbox. Evelyn answered her door in bare feet, loose linen pants, and a gray sweater that slipped off one shoulder. Her hair was down. Her face was sleepy. It was unfair, honestly. "Caleb," she said, voice soft with surprise. "It's early." "I know, sorry." Her eyes sharpened. "What happened?" I handed her the note. She read it once, then again. Her mouth pressed into a flat line. "Sophie?" I asked. "No." She didn't sound uncertain. "Sophie would use punctuation." Despite myself, I laughed. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe, the note dangling from her fingers. "Mrs. Donnelly, maybe. She has the moral courage of a church bulletin." "You're not upset?" "Oh, I'm upset." She looked up at me. "But not because someone warned you. I'm upset because for half a second I wondered whether this would make you step back." The honesty in that hit harder than the note. I moved closer, stopping just outside the threshold. "Do you want me to?" "No." No hesitation. One small word, steady as a hand on my chest. I exhaled. "Good, because I don't want to." Her expression changed, worry giving way to something warmer. "You came over to tell me that?" "I came over to show you the note, but yes, mostly that." She opened the door wider. "Then come in before the neighborhood committee holds an emergency meeting." Her kitchen smelled like coffee and cinnamon. A half-finished watercolor sat on the table. Loose blue shadows, yellow light, the suggestion of a porch. "Our porch?" I asked. "My porch," she said, pouring coffee. "Don't get possessive after one date and several kisses." "Several?" I counted. "How many?" She handed me a mug. A lady never reveals data that can be used against her. We sat at her small kitchen table, knees close beneath it. Close enough that every time she shifted, I felt the brush of her leg against mine. That tiny contact did more to calm me than any explanation could have. I don't want you shielded from gossip, I said. I want to stand beside you through it, but I need to know if I'm making your life harder. Evelyn wrapped both hands around her mug. You are. My chest tightened. Then she reached over and touched my wrist. But not in a bad way, she said. You're making me visible again. That is harder than being invisible. It's also better. I turned my hand over, palm up. She placed hers in it. I spent 3 years being treated like something finished, she said quietly. A closed book. A woman with all the important chapters behind her. And then you moved in next door with your organized garage and your terrible jokes. And I started wanting future tense. Future tense? 2 words and I was gone. I lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. I want that with you. Her lashes lowered. Say it plainly. My heart kicked. I want more dates, more coffee, more kissing on your porch where everyone can see. I want to learn how you take your eggs and what music you play when you paint. I want to be the man you call when the sink leaks, and also the man you call when nothing is wrong, and you just want someone there. Her eyes shone. That plain enough? I asked. No, she whispered, but it's a good start. She leaned across the corner of the table and kissed me. It began tender, the kind of kiss that says thank you. Then her fingers slid into my hair, and the thank you became something with heat in it. I stood, drawing her up with me, and she came willingly, smiling against my mouth as if she liked discovering what she could do to me. My hands settled at her waist, hers flattened on my chest. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. Somewhere outside, a car passed. The world continued, rude and irrelevant. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. I have a watercolor class in 40 minutes, she said. I can leave. I didn't say that. I grinned. You're going to be late. I'm the teacher. So they can wait 5 minutes while I make a poor decision. She kissed me again, quick and bright and devastating, then stepped away before I could forget every boundary I'd ever respected. Tonight, she said, slightly breathless. Come to the community center. My students are doing their little exhibit. Nothing fancy. You want me there? I want to stop hiding before I start. I went. I wore the same navy shirt because it had apparently performed well, and I brought flowers because I was not an idiot. Not peonies. I wasn't ready to step into Patrick's tradition, but sunflowers, bold and ridiculous in brown paper. Evelyn saw me from across the community center room. Her smile lit first in her eyes, then everywhere. A few heads turned. Sophie was one of them. She stood near the high refreshment table, arms folded, looking like she had spent the afternoon arguing with herself and lost. Evelyn crossed the room to me before I could decide whether to wave. You came, she said. I was invited by a beautiful artist. Her gaze dropped to the flowers. For me? No, for Mrs. Donnelly. I'm courting surveillance. Evelyn laughed and took them, pressing her face briefly to the petals. They're perfect. Then, in front of her students, her daughter, and 2 women pretending not to stare over plastic cups of punch, she rose on her toes and kissed my cheek. Not my mouth. Still, the room noticed. So did Sophie. For an hour, Evelyn showed me paintings and introduced me as Caleb, my neighbor, the first 3 times. On the 4th, she paused. Then she said, Caleb, my date. I felt it like a hand around my heart. The woman she'd introduced me to, a retired nurse with purple glasses, beamed. Well, that's much more interesting than neighbor. It is, Evelyn said, and her fingers found mine. Sophie waited until Evelyn stepped away to speak with a student before approaching me. The note wasn't from me, she said. I know. Mom told you? She said you'd use punctuation. Despite herself, Sophie smiled. It faded fast. I'm trying, she said. I don't love this, but I'm trying. That matters. She looked toward her mother, who was laughing beside a wall of landscapes. I forgot she could look like that. Like what? Like the world still surprises her. I didn't answer. My throat felt tight. Sophie glanced back at me. If you hurt her, I'll hate you. That seems fair. But if you make her happy, her voice softened. I might learn to be grateful. Before I could respond, Evelyn returned. Are we negotiating custody? She asked. Just issuing standard daughter warnings, Sophie said. Evelyn slipped her arm through mine. He's been warned by anonymous note already. At this rate, he'll need a helmet. Sophie blinked. Anonymous note? Evelyn's expression went still. I looked between them. You didn't tell her? I was going to. Sophie's eyes sharpened. Mom, what note? For 1 second, the room tilted toward tension. Then Evelyn tightened her hold on my arm and looked at me, not her daughter. Later, she said. Tonight, I'm at an art exhibit with my date. My date. She chose the word deliberately, chose me deliberately. I covered her hand with mine. And your date wants to see the painting with the yellow porch again? Her smile returned, grateful and a little shaky. We walked away together, her shoulder pressed to my arm, and behind us the questions waited. But for that moment, Evelyn leaned into me in a room full of people, and I understood something simple. We were not hiding anymore. The note turned out to be from Mrs. Donnelly. We found out because Sophie, who did believe in punctuation and confrontation, marched across the street the next morning and asked her. By lunchtime, Mrs. Donnelly appeared on Evelyn's porch holding a lemon loaf and wearing the expression of a woman prepared to be both guilty and offended. I was only trying to protect her, she said. Evelyn stood beside me, arms folded. By leaving anonymous notes on Caleb's truck? Mrs. Donnelly's chin trembled. Patrick was my friend. The porch went quiet. Evelyn's posture softened, but she didn't move away from me. He was mine too, she said. I know. Mrs. Donnelly looked down at the loaf. I watched you after he passed. You were so broken. Then I saw you smiling at him, and I thought... She glanced at me. I thought it was too soon. It's been 3 years, Evelyn said gently. I know. And even if it had been 3 months, that would be mine to decide. Mrs. Donnelly nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. You're right. I didn't say anything. This wasn't my apology to accept. Evelyn took the lemon loaf from her. Then, because she was Evelyn, she sighed and said, This does not mean you're forgiven. It means your baking has been taken into custody. Mrs. Donnelly laughed wetly. Sophie, standing at the bottom of the steps, muttered, That's fair. After Mrs. Donnelly left, Sophie lingered. She looked at her mother, then at me. I'm sorry too, she said, for assuming the worst. Evelyn reached for her daughter's hand. You loved your father. I still do. So do I. Evelyn's voice wavered, but her grip on my hand remained firm. Loving Caleb doesn't erase that. My heart stopped. Evelyn seemed to realize what she'd said at the exact same moment I did. Sophie's eyes widened. I looked at Evelyn. Loving? Her cheeks went pink, but she lifted her chin. Don't make me repeat myself in front of my child and the lemon loaf. Sophie made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Then she hugged her mother hard. When she pulled away, she wiped her eyes and pointed at me. I still reserve the right to be difficult. I'd be disappointed if you weren't, I said. She left us alone on the porch. For a few seconds, Evelyn and I just stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by morning light and the smell of lemon. Finally, I said, You love me? She looked at the new boards beneath our feet. Apparently. I was under emotional pressure. From baked goods? Powerful forces. I stepped closer. Evelyn. Her smile faded into something vulnerable and brave. Yes, she said. I love you. Not because you fixed my porch. Not because you were kind when I was lonely. I love you because you make me feel like I'm still becoming someone. And because you look at me like I'm not a memory. I touched her cheek, and she leaned into my palm. I love you too, I said. I think I started somewhere between the chicken soup and the drunk flamingo incident. She laughed, then kissed me before I could say anything else. It wasn't cautious anymore, it was certain. Her hand slid up my chest. Mine settled at her waist. The porch held under us, strong and steady, while Evelyn kissed me in full view of Maple Hollow Lane like she had decided the whole world could adjust. 6 months later, her porch had become our place, not officially. I still lived next door, and Evelyn still pretended my garage organization was a symptom of emotional damage. But most evenings, I ended up on her steps with coffee or wine or a plate of whatever experimental dinner she claimed was perfectly edible if approached with optimism. Sophie came around every Sunday. At first, she watched me like a judge at a parole hearing. Then, one afternoon, she found me replacing Evelyn's leaky kitchen faucet and said, "You know, Dad would have liked you." I didn't answer right away. She looked embarrassed by her own honesty. "Not immediately. He would have made you work for it." I would have expected nothing less. That night, I told Evelyn what Sophie had said. She cried quietly against my shoulder, not because she was sad exactly, but because life had opened a door she thought was sealed shut. I held her until she lifted her head and said, "If you tell anyone I'm sentimental, I'll deny it. Your secret is safe. You're smiling. I love you when you threaten me. You love me always." I kissed her forehead. Yes. By the following spring, the magnolia tree Patrick had died beneath bloomed so heavily it looked covered in pale pink lanterns. Evelyn stood under it one Saturday morning with paint on her wrist and sunlight in her hair. I was supposed to be helping hang shelves in her studio, but mostly I was watching her. She caught me. "You're staring again," she said. "I'm gathering reference material." "For what?" "For the rest of my life." Her brush went still. I had planned something better: dinner, candles, maybe music. Something worthy of her. Instead, I reached into my pocket right there beneath the magnolia tree, with sawdust on my jeans and my heart trying to climb out of my chest. Evelyn stared at the small velvet box in my hand. "Caleb," she whispered, "I know you once said, if you were 20 years younger, you'd marry me." I opened the box. "I'm asking as the man who loves you exactly as you are, today, here. No younger, no different. Evelyn Reed, will you marry me?" Her eyes filled. Then she laughed through tears. "You fixed my porch and got cocky. Is that a yes?" She stepped close, took my face in both hands and kissed me under the blooming magnolia until the ring box nearly slipped from my fingers. "Yes," she said against my mouth. "Obviously yes." We got married on that porch in September. Small ceremony, sunflowers and peonies. Sophie, standing beside her mother, crying openly and threatening anyone who mentioned it. Mrs. Donnelly brought 3 lemon loaves and behaved herself with heroic effort. Evelyn wore green. I wore the navy shirt from our first date because she insisted it had historical significance. When the vows were done, I kissed my wife on the boards I had repaired, and everyone clapped except Evelyn, who whispered, "If I were 20 years younger, I'd still marry you." I smiled against her lips. Good thing I didn't wait. That evening, after the guests left and the porch lights came on, we danced barefoot on the steps while the neighborhood settled into dusk around us. Her silver dark hair brushed my jaw. Her hand rested over my heart. Beneath us, the porch stood solid and sure, and for the first time in years, neither of us felt like we were starting over alone. What would you have done if your widowed neighbor joked, "If I were 20 years younger, I'd marry you," and you realized you didn't want her to be younger at all? Have you ever experienced something similar? Finding love where everyone else only saw complications? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.